Have you ever felt that invisible weight, that silent judgment simply because of who you are? Have you ever had your dignity challenged, your very presence questioned, in a place where you had every right to be? Or perhaps you've witnessed such moments, feeling the uncomfortable stir of injustice. Tonight we share a story that dives deep into that experience, a story not just of conflict, but of courageous defiance. It's the story of Simone Dubois, a talented young black woman whose routine errand turned into a jarring confrontation, revealing the insidious nature of prejudice. This isn't just a tale of a single incident. It's a powerful testament to the resilience of the human spirit, the fight for respect, and the unexpected strength found when pushed to the brink. Get ready, because this is a journey from frustration to fury, from fear to unwavering fortitude. Her trusty sedan, a well-loved extension of her independent spirit, purred as she navigated towards the new upscale supermarket in a blossoming suburban development she rarely visited. She'd heard it had the best organic produce, and Simone, ever the advocate for healthy living, decided a detour was in order. The parking lot, as expected for a Friday evening, was a chaotic mosaic of vehicles, a testament to everyone's collective rush towards weekend peace. Her eyes, trained from years of navigating urban jungles, scanned for the elusive empty spot, and then, there it was, a perfect space, gleaming invitingly near the main entrance like a little beacon of hope in the asphalt sea. A small, triumphant smile touched her lips. She signaled slowly, deliberately, her indicator light blinking its calm assertion. She began to ease her car into the spot, the tires gently kissing the painted lines. A simple, everyday action, right? But sometimes, the most mundane moments are precisely where the extraordinary and the terrifying begins. Just as her front wheels settled into place, a roar erupted. Not from an engine, but from a man. He materialized seemingly out of nowhere, a figure bursting with unbridled fury. He was a middle-aged white man, his face a ruddy mask of indignation, his shirt straining over a stout frame. Let's call him Arthur Finch. He marched towards her car, pointing a trembling accusatory finger at the spot Simone had just occupied. "That's my spot," he bellowed, his voice raw, laced with an unsettling edge that cut through the evening air. Simone, momentarily stunned, rolled down her window. She met his gaze, trying to maintain her composure. "Excuse me?" she asked, her voice calm, a deliberate effort to de-escalate. "I believe I signaled and pulled in first." "There was no one here." Arthur Finch's face contorted further, his eyes small and beady, narrowing into angry slits. "You just cut me off, girl. I was waiting for that spot. You people are always trying to sneak in where you don't belong." A chill, thin and sharp as a razor, traced its way down Simone's spine. "You people." The words hung in the air, heavy and loaded, stripping the argument of its triviality. This wasn't just about a parking spot anymore. This was something else. This was different. This seemingly innocuous parking dispute quickly morphs into something far more insidious. This is where we often miss the early warning signs. What started as a simple disagreement over a shared space quickly revealed itself to be a common phenomenon where everyday annoyances become weaponized by underlying prejudices. Arthur Finch didn't just disagree. He immediately escalated, his face flushed not just with frustration but with a palpable sense of entitlement and rage that seemed disproportionate to the situation. It's a classic example of gaslighting and victim blaming. He wasn't just claiming the spot, he was trying to shift the entire narrative onto Simone, asserting that she was in the wrong, that she was the aggressor, when all she did was politely explain her actions. This is a tactic often employed by individuals steeped in bias, immediately flipping the script to make the marginalized person seem at fault, to deflect from their own prejudice. Think about it. How many times have we or someone we know encountered those seemingly minor incidents, those microaggressions, a condescending tone, a dismissive glance, a comment that feels off, but you can't quite put your finger on it? We often brush them off, tell ourselves we're overreacting or that it's just a bad day for the other person. But these seemingly minor acts are often the first sparks, the early warning signs that deeper biases are at play, waiting for the right moment, or the wrong one, to ignite. Simone felt that chilling shift, that cold, unfamiliar hostility that signaled this was about more than just asphalt and painted lines. It was about perceived ownership, about belonging in spaces they considered theirs. and the chilling implication that she, Simone Dubois, did not. And as Arthur Finch took a step closer, his body language stiffening, the air around Simone seemed to thicken, the promise of a quiet evening now shattered by a growing sense of dread. The trap had been set, not by accident, but by a chilling, undeniable force of prejudice. He wasn't finished, not by a long shot. The words "you people" were just the prelude to a symphony of hate that was about to unfold, threatening to consume not just her evening, but her very sense of dignity. Arthur Finch wasn't just angry, he was seething, his fury a tangible force that seemed to distort the very air around Simone. He took another aggressive step, invading her personal space. His eyes narrowed, scrutinizing her as if she were an infestation. "You just cut me off, girl," he snarled again, his voice rising, drawing more curious glances from passers-by. "You people never pay attention to anyone else, do you? Always thinking the world revolves around you." Simone felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. The phrase, "you people," hung in the air, a venomous veil dropping over the flimsy pretense of a parking dispute. It wasn't about the spot. It was about her, her identity, her presence. She tried again, a desperate attempt to cling to civility. "Sir, I truly didn't see you. I apologize if there was a misunderstanding, but I clearly had my signal on and pulled in." His response was a bitter laugh devoid of humor, dripping with disdain. "Misunderstanding? Oh, I understand perfectly well. It's always a misunderstanding with your kind, isn't it? Always an excuse for your arrogance." He spat the last word out, his face contorted in a grimace that sent a shiver down Simone's spine. It was a look of pure, unadulterated contempt. The words were weapons, sharper than any blade. Your kind's arrogance. It wasn't just an insult. It was a denial of her humanity, an attempt to strip her of her worth, to diminish her to a stereotype. Every syllable was a stone thrown at her dignity. Simone felt a hot flush of anger, a surge of defiant pride. She had faced subtle prejudices before, the polite dismissal, the unexpected oversight, the lingering stares, but never this blatant, this venomous, not like this, in broad daylight, in a bustling supermarket parking lot. She clenched her fists, her knuckles white against her dark skin. The urge to lash out, to match his rage, was almost overwhelming, but a deeper part of her, forged in resilience, urged caution. Don't give him what he wants, she told herself. Don't stoop to his level. She took a slow, deliberate breath, trying to steady her racing heart. Around them, a crowd had begun to form. Faces, initially curious, now wore expressions, ranging from uneasy fascination to outright discomfort. Some pulled out their phones, not to help, but to record the escalating drama. Others simply stood, frozen, observing from a safe distance. A couple pushing a shopping cart veered sharply away, pretending not to notice. A young man, glued to his phone, walked past without even glancing up. Simone met their eyes one by one. She saw the recognition of injustice in some, the uncomfortable avoidance in others. A silent plea formed on her lips, a desperate yearning for someone, anyone, to step forward, to say something, to break the suffocating tension, but no one did. Not a single voice rose to challenge Arthur Finch's hateful tirade. She was trapped, not just by Arthur's physical presence blocking her car door, but by the overwhelming, chilling silence of the crowd. It was a profound isolation, a harsh reminder that even in a sea of faces she was utterly, terrifyingly alone against this wave of prejudice. This was the crushing weight of the bystander effect in action, a silent complicity that often emboldens the aggressor. What we're witnessing here is the raw, ugly truth of how prejudice operates. Arthur Finch isn't merely expressing anger over a parking spot. He's dehumanizing Simone, reducing her to a stereotype, making it easier for him to justify his aggression. When you call someone your kind, or imply they don't belong, you strip away their individuality, their right to be treated with basic respect. This psychological tactic paves the way for further abuse, making the aggressor feel justified in their actions, no matter how egregious. And then there's the crushing weight of the crowd's inaction. The bystander effect isn't just a psychological term. It's a terrifying reality. People hesitate to intervene for a myriad of reasons: fear for their own safety, uncertainty about what's happening, or the dangerous assumption that someone else will step up. This diffusion of responsibility often means no one steps up. Compare this to inspiring stories of people who, despite fear, have quickly intervened in hate crimes, preventing further harm. The missed opportunities here are palpable. Each averted glance, each whispered comment, each phone held up to record rather than to act, only served to empower Arthur Finch, making him feel invincible in his venomous attack. The comfort of silence for bystanders often comes at the excruciating cost of dignity and safety for the victim. Allyship isn't just a word, it's an action, a crucial choice to speak up and step forward, even when it's uncomfortable. Because sometimes the loudest message isn't the hate spoken, but the silence heard. And in that deafening silence, Arthur Finch, emboldened, raised his hand, ready to deliver a blow that would forever change Simone's life and ignite a different kind of fight entirely. The air, thick with unspoken prejudice and the chilling silence of the crowd, crackled. Arthur Finch, emboldened by the lack of intervention, leaned in closer, his voice a venomous hiss. "I said, you people always think you can just do whatever you want. You don't belong here." And then, without warning, a sharp, resounding crack echoed through the parking lot. His hand, heavy and hard, connected squarely with Simone's cheek. The world seemed to tilt. A searing pain exploded across her face, followed by a dizzying shock. It wasn't just the physical sting, though that was immediate and undeniable. It was the profound violation, the absolute audacity of it. A hot, furious wave of humiliation washed over her, chilling her to the bone. This wasn't just an argument. This was an assault, a racist, unprovoked attack that hit her like a physical blow, but hurt even deeper, tearing at the very fabric of her pride, her worth, her right to simply exist. In that split second, the polite, composed Simone vanished, replaced by an ancient, primal instinct for self-preservation. And then something snapped. Not in a violent, uncontrolled way, but with a cold, righteous clarity. Every instance of discrimination, every whispered slight, every knowing glance she had ever endured seemed to coalesce into this one agonizing moment. Her hand, almost on its own accord, flew up. No thought, no hesitation, just instinct. Smack! Her open palm met Arthur Finch's face with a loud, satisfying thud that momentarily stunned the entire parking lot into silence. He reeled back, his eyes wide with disbelief, a red mark blossoming on his cheek. The shock on his face was almost comical. The man who had just delivered a hateful, unwarranted blow was utterly flummoxed that someone would dare strike back. Simone's chest heaved. It wasn't about revenge. It was about dignity. It was a visceral, desperate cry that reverberated through the silence. "You will not walk all over me. Not today. Not ever." For a long, tense moment they stood there, breathing heavily, the entire parking lot a tableau of frozen shock. Then a collective murmur rippled through the crowd. Arthur Finch, his face a mask of furious indignation and humiliation, stumbled back to his SUV. Simone, her cheek throbbing, watched him, her heart pounding. She thought, foolishly, that it was over, that she had defended herself, and that was that. She started to pull out, intending to drive away to escape this nightmare. But as Arthur peeled out of the parking spot, roaring past her, he swerved dangerously close. With a sickening scrape, she heard a sound that made her blood run cold. She saw his arm reaching out of his window, something glinting in his hand. She pulled out of the parking lot and into a less crowded side street. Her hands were shaking. She forced herself to pull over, got out, and walked slowly to the side of her beloved car. There it was, a long, jagged scratch, deep and deliberate, gouged across the passenger door, marring the sleek, dark paint. It wasn't just a scratch. It was a sneering, ugly scar, a physical manifestation of his hatred, a final act of cowardice from a man who couldn't stand being challenged. The glinting object she'd seen was a key. He had keyed her car. The rage, momentarily quelled by her own defiant slap, now roared back with renewed fury. This wasn't accidental, this was personal, this was malicious. This wasn't just property damage, it was a hateful statement, a petty, vindictive act meant to ensure she couldn't forget this encounter, couldn't erase the memory of his venom. What we've just witnessed is the terrifying escalation of aggression driven by prejudice. Simone's response wasn't an act of violence for violence sake. It was a pure, unadulterated act of self-defense, a visceral reaction to having her dignity trampled underfoot. It's crucial to distinguish this from Arthur Finch's initial aggression, which stemmed from an entitled, hateful mindset. His slap was an act of dominance, her slap was an act of reclamation. But true to form, unchecked anger and deep-seated prejudice rarely end with a single outburst. When an aggressor feels challenged or humiliated, their rage can fester, leading to further, often more insidious acts. Arthur's vandalism wasn't just random destruction. It was a targeted act, a final attempt to exert control and leave a lasting mark of his baseless hatred. It served as a stark reminder that the cost of prejudice extends far beyond immediate physical harm. It leaves behind emotional scars, yes, but also tangible, visible wounds that serve as painful reminders of the injustice. Hate-motivated property damage is a chilling reality for many marginalized communities, causing not just financial loss, but profound emotional distress and a lingering sense of insecurity. Standing your ground against injustice is vital, but always be aware that prejudice, when challenged, can often escalate into further, more petty and damaging acts. The true cost of hatred isn't just the initial confrontation, it's the ripple effect of emotional and physical damage it leaves in its wake. But here's the twist. Sometimes, those very scars become the catalysts for a much greater fight. Simone stood there staring at the fresh, ugly wound on her car, a symbol of what she had endured. But then, a different emotion began to simmer beneath the surface of her rage. A cold, hard resolve. She picked up her phone. This was no longer just a personal affront. This was a crime, and she was about to call for justice. The deep, ugly scratch on Simone's car seemed to pulse under the dim streetlights, a stark, undeniable testament to the malice she had just endured. Her initial surge of defensive adrenaline had subsided, replaced by a trembling anger and a profound sense of violation. This wasn't just a physical altercation, this was a hate-filled attack, culminating in deliberate destruction. And for the first time, a clear thought cut through her swirling emotions. This is a crime, and I will not let it stand. Her fingers, still slightly shaky, found her phone. With a deep, fortifying breath, she dialed 911. Her voice, though a little unsteady, was firm as she recounted the ordeal. The dispatcher listened calmly, and within what felt like an eternity but was only minutes, the flashing blue and red lights of an Atlanta Police Department cruiser painted the street. 2 officers approached, their expressions professional, their questions direct. As Simone recounted the entire horrifying sequence, the verbal abuse, the racist slurs, the slap, her desperate act of self-defense, and finally the cowardly act of vandalism, she felt a fragile sense of relief. Help had arrived. The officers, a young woman and a seasoned veteran, listened intently. They took notes, their faces unreadable. Just as Simone finished her statement, a familiar, aggressive voice cut through the air. Arthur Finch had returned, not alone this time, but with a woman who looked like his wife, her face a mask of concern and bewilderment. "Officer," Arthur began, his voice surprisingly calm now, almost rehearsed. "Thank goodness you're here. This woman," he said, pointing dramatically at Simone, "she went completely ballistic. I just asked her politely about a parking spot and she attacked me, hit me, and then she's claiming I damaged her car. It's ridiculous." He even dabbed at his cheek, feigning a tremor in his hand. Simone's jaw tightened. She watched, disgusted, as he spun his web of deceit, painting himself as the innocent victim of a deranged woman. He even mumbled something about being afraid for my life, a stark contrast to the aggressive bully who had just slapped her and keyed her car. The officers, however, remained impassive. They had heard countless versions of these stories. They turned to Simone, their gaze neutral. "Ma'am, do you have any evidence to support your claim?" the veteran officer asked. Simone's heart sank for a moment, her word against his. In a world where victims of prejudice often faced an uphill battle just to be believed, this was the moment of truth. But then, a thought flashed in her mind. "The supermarket," she stated, her voice regaining its steady power. "It has security cameras. They'll have captured everything. From the argument to the slap, to him driving past and scratching my car, the officers exchanged glances. This was concrete. "All right, Mr. Finch," the female officer said, her tone firm. "We'll be reviewing the security footage, and we'll also be investigating the damage to Ms. Dubois' vehicle." Arthur Finch's smug expression faltered, a flicker of panic in his eyes. He stammered, tried to backtrack, but it was too late. A little over an hour later, at the police station, the truth emerged, stark and undeniable, projected onto a screen in an interrogation room. The security footage was the silent, impartial witness. It showed Arthur Finch's aggressive approach, his menacing posture, his hand clearly striking Simone. It showed Simone's instinctive defensive retaliation. And chillingly, it showed Arthur Finch's SUV swerving, his arm extending, the glint of a key as he deliberately gouged her car. The officers had also found fresh, distinct scratches on Simone's car that perfectly matched the description. The evidence was irrefutable. Arthur Finch, faced with the cold, hard facts, could only sputter a pathetic denial before he was taken into custody. This phase of Simone's journey illuminates a critical, often frustrating aspect of seeking justice: the constant battle between truth and perception. In many cases of discrimination and assault, proving racist intent can be incredibly difficult, especially when it's one person's word against another's. Aggressors, like Arthur Finch, are often masters of manipulation, quick to play the victim and twist the narrative to their advantage. They exploit systemic biases, knowing that the victim may face an inherent skepticism simply due to their identity. This is precisely why the power of documentation is so utterly crucial. That supermarket security footage wasn't just a nice-to-have. It was the unsung hero of this entire ordeal. It provided the objective, irrefutable evidence that cut through Arthur's lies, exposing his true intent and actions. Without it, Simone's fight for justice would have been infinitely harder, perhaps even impossible. This highlights why capturing incidents on camera, whenever safe and possible, has become a vital tool for marginalized communities seeking accountability. Navigating the legal labyrinth is a daunting task, even with clear evidence. The system can be slow, emotionally draining, and at times feel inherently biased. Many victims, exhausted and re-traumatized by the process, choose not to pursue legal action. They fall prey to common mistakes, second-guessing their own experience, failing to document injuries or damages, or simply not knowing their rights. Simone, however, did not give up. She trusted her gut, held on to her truth, and provided the key piece of evidence that would bring her assailant to account. In the fight for justice, concrete evidence often speaks louder than any accusation. Trust your instincts, document everything, and remember that even in a seemingly flawed system, truth, when backed by proof, can prevail. The initial victory at the police station was a crucial step, but Simone knew that this was just the beginning of the gauntlet. The next challenge awaited her in the sterile, imposing environment of the courtroom, where words would become weapons, and the weight of her testimony would be tested under the harsh glare of legal scrutiny. The air in the courtroom on the day of the trial was thick, heavy with anticipation and the solemn weight of justice. Sunlight, filtered through tall, arched windows, cast patterns on the polished wooden benches. For Simone, sitting at the plaintiff's table, it felt less like a public space and more like a stage where the most harrowing moments of her life would be replayed for an audience of strangers. She clutched the hand of her lawyer, Miss Evelyn Vance, a woman whose sharp intellect was matched only by her unwavering calm. Evelyn, with her crisp suit and focused gaze, exuded an aura of quiet power that was immensely comforting. Across the room, at the defense table, sat Arthur Finch. He looked different now, no longer the enraged bully of the parking lot, but a man attempting to appear composed, even slightly aggrieved. Yet, as their eyes met across the aisle, Simone caught a flicker of the old malice in his gaze, a subtle sneer that sent a fresh shiver down her spine. He was still the same man, just wearing a different mask. The weight of his presence was palpable, a stark reminder of the battle that lay ahead. The trial began. Evelyn Vance rose, her voice clear and resonant, filling the courtroom with a narrative built on truth and irrefutable evidence. She meticulously laid out the facts, painting a vivid picture of Arthur Finch's hostile, clearly motivated acts, the unprovoked verbal assault, The chilling racist slurs, the violent slap, and the cowardly, malicious act of vandalism. She spoke of Simone's dignity, her courage, and her desperate act of self-defense. "This was not a parking dispute, ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Evelyn declared, her gaze sweeping across the room. "This was a hate-filled assault, plain and simple, against a young woman simply trying to go about her day." Then came the defense. Arthur Finch's attorney, a slick, well-dressed man, began his counter-narrative, a masterclass in distortion. He tried to paint Arthur as a sympathetic figure, a pillar of the community who had simply had a very bad day. He argued that Arthur was under immense stress, that he had merely reacted poorly to Simone's aggressive driving. He even dared to suggest that Simone's slap was the true act of aggression, implying she had provoked Arthur, triggering a momentary lapse in judgment. He hinted at his client's fragile health and decades of blameless citizenship, trying to appeal to the jury's compassion, to make them forget the venomous words and violent actions captured on camera. Simone listened, her heart aching with a mixture of anger and disbelief. It was infuriating to hear her pain, her courage, and her trauma twisted into a narrative designed to absolve her attacker. She had to fight the urge to shout, to stand up and expose the blatant lies. But Evelyn's gentle squeeze of her hand reminded her to remain calm, to let the evidence speak. The true turning point arrived when the prosecutor presented the crucial piece of evidence, the supermarket security footage. As the grainy video began to play on the large screen, a hush fell over the courtroom. Every eye was riveted. They saw Arthur Finch's aggressive approach, his face contorted in anger, his hand striking Simone. They saw Simone's instinctive, lightning-fast retaliation, and then the chilling, undeniable proof of his cowardice, his arm extending, the gleam of the key, the deliberate scrape against her car. The video spoke volumes, a silent, impartial witness that exposed every lie, every twisted narrative. Arthur Finch at the defense table, visibly blanched, unable to hide his guilt any longer. Then it was Simone's turn to testify. She walked to the stand, her legs feeling heavy but her resolve firm. She swore an oath, her hands steady. As she recounted the events, her voice, though filled with emotion, remained clear and unwavering. She detailed the racist slurs, the fear, the pain, and her singular intent to defend herself. She looked directly at the jury, her eyes conveying the full weight of her experience. "I didn't want to fight him," she stated, her voice resonating through the hushed room. "But when he struck me, when he dehumanized me, I knew I had a right to defend my dignity. No one has the right to treat another human being like that, just because of the color of their skin." The courtroom, for all its solemnity, truly is a stage. Here, we saw the stark contrast between the prosecution's quest for truth and the defense's calculated tactics. Arthur Finch's attorney employed a common courtroom strategy: character assassination, implying Simone was aggressive, and emotional appeals, portraying Arthur as a sympathetic, stressed individual. It's a painful reality that victims, especially those from marginalized communities, often face the immense burden of proving not only the crime, but also their own credibility, while their attackers attempt to shift blame and manipulate perception. The burden on the victim in a trial is immense. Simone not only had to relive her trauma, but also recount it under the intense scrutiny of a courtroom, knowing that every word would be picked apart, every emotion potentially misinterpreted. This re-traumatization is a significant reason why many victims, despite having a strong case, choose to drop charges. The emotional toll can simply be too high. But Simone persevered, and the silent witness, that security footage, was the unexpected plot twist that completely undermined the defense's carefully constructed facade. It was the undeniable counter to every lie, every attempt to distort reality. It transformed Simone's word from mere testimony into irrefutable fact. By hoc rut ra. The justice system is a battleground where truth can often be obscured by rhetoric. Your voice, even trembling, holds immense power when you speak your truth, especially when backed by irrefutable evidence. But the true power, the deeper lesson, is that while a verdict can bring legal closure, it doesn't always erase the scars of injustice. And sometimes the most profound victories are felt not in the courtroom, but in the quiet strength discovered within yourself. The jury had heard the arguments, seen the evidence, and witnessed Simone's courage. Now, all that remained was the agonizing wait for their decision, a decision that would determine if justice, truly, would prevail. The courtroom, once buzzing with the drama of testimony and the tension of cross-examination, now held its breath in a profound silence. The jury had retired, their faces unreadable, carrying the weight of evidence and human lives into their deliberation room. For Simone, sitting beside Evelyn Vance, the minutes stretched into an eternity. Every tick of the clock, every hushed whisper from the gallery, grated on her nerves. Her mind replayed every moment of the ordeal. Arthur's sneer, the sting of the slap, the chilling scrape of the key. She had told her truth, presented undeniable evidence, and had stood firm, yet the outcome felt utterly, terrifyingly out of her hands. The legal system, for all its promise of fairness, was a labyrinth, and the final decision rested with 12 strangers, carrying their own biases and interpretations. She knew that even with overwhelming evidence, justice for black individuals in America could sometimes be agonizingly elusive. A cold knot of anxiety tightened in her stomach. Then, a rustle. The doors to the jury room opened. The bailiff's voice, solemn and formal, announced their return. A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Simone's heart hammered against her ribs. She braced herself, eyes fixed on the jury foreman. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," the judge's voice boomed. "Have you reached a verdict?" "We have, Your Honor," the foreman replied, his voice clear. The word guilty reverberated through the silent courtroom, a pronouncement that felt both definitive and profoundly surreal. Guilty on all counts. Arthur Finch, the man who had spewed hate and violence, was found accountable. He slumped in his chair, his face pale with shock, a pathetic gurgle of disbelief escaping his lips. He muttered something, a desperate, futile threat directed at Simone, but it was drowned out by the swift actions of the bailiffs, who moved to restrain him. A wave of immense relief washed over Simone, so profound it almost buckled her knees. She felt Eoven squeeze her hand, a silent cheer. But beneath the relief, there was an unexpected emptiness mixed with sadness. It wasn't the triumphant euphoria she might have anticipated. The monster had been caged, yes, but the scars, both visible and invisible, remained. This legal victory, while crucial, didn't magically erase the profound pain, the deep-seated anger, or the pervasive presence of the prejudice that fueled Arthur Finch's actions. It felt like a necessary step, but not a full healing. Stepping out of the courthouse, the setting sun cast long, dramatic shadows. The media swarmed, microphones thrust towards Evelyn Vance, who delivered a calm, articulate statement about the importance of accountability and standing against hate. Simone stood beside her, a quiet presence, observing. The physical mark on her cheek had faded, and the scratches on her car could be repaired, but the deeper scratches on her pride were wounds that wouldn't easily heal. She looked at the faces around her, some cheering, some quietly acknowledging, some still uncomprehending. The reality hit her with a fresh wave. This wasn't just about Arthur Finch. His hatred was a symptom of a larger systemic disease. The verdict was a victory in this particular battle, but the war against racism and prejudice was far from over. It was a long, arduous fight, ingrained in the very fabric of society, often invisible to those who don't experience it daily. She understood that her legal triumph, while critical, was merely a ripple in a vast ocean of injustice. This wasn't the end of her journey. It was, in fact, just the beginning of a different kind of fight. Simone's experience highlights a crucial, often overlooked aspect of justice. What does justice truly mean? For victims, legal victories rarely equate to complete emotional healing or the eradication of systemic issues. While Arthur Finch's conviction was a significant win, it couldn't erase the memory of the hate, the lingering sense of vulnerability, or the underlying societal prejudice that still exists. This twist, the absence of pure elation replaced by a somber understanding, adds a profound layer of emotional depth to the narrative. It's a powerful lesson that personal accountability, while vital, is just one piece of the puzzle. Moreover, Simone's journey underscores the persistent reality of hate in our society. One conviction doesn't dismantle the ingrained biases that lead to such acts. The burden of proof for marginalized communities, particularly black individuals, in getting their experiences validated by the justice system is disproportionately high. It's a constant battle against stereotypes, preconceived notions, and the very real possibility of being disbelieved. By Hock Rutra. Legal justice is a necessary step, but it is not the destination. The fight for true equality is an ongoing marathon, not a sprint. Healing from trauma is a journey of self-discovery, and often the scars we carry become the very fuel for future battles. Simone's victory in court was a powerful affirmation of her worth, but it also became a profound realization that her story could and should be a catalyst for change far beyond the courtroom walls. And with that realization, a new purpose began to take root in Simone's heart, leading her towards a path where her voice would resonate far wider, inspiring others to join the ongoing, vital fight for a truly just and equitable world. The verdict was a victory, but the quiet, lingering sadness in Simone's heart was a testament to the deeper wounds inflicted by prejudice. Sitting in her apartment days later, the news cycles had moved on, but the feeling of injustice still gnawed at her. She realized then, true change didn't just happen in courtrooms. It had to happen in hearts, in communities, in the everyday actions of people. Her story, raw and painful as it was, held a power she hadn't fully understood. It was a mirror reflecting a pervasive problem, and it was a beacon for others. This realization became her call to action for herself. Simone began reaching out not just for healing but for purpose. She connected with local non-profit organizations dedicated to human rights and racial equality in Atlanta. She attended workshops, initially as an observer, then as a participant. She listened to other stories, equally painful, equally courageous, and, slowly, tentatively, she began to share her own. A voice, once trembling with fear and anger in that parking lot, grew stronger, clearer, imbued with the hard-won wisdom of her experience. Simone began speaking at community forums, at local colleges, even in small, intimate gatherings in churches and community centers. She recounted the parking lot incident, the venomous words, the shocking blow, and the difficult, often exhausting fight for justice. She didn't sugarcoat the pain, but she always emphasized the resilience, the refusal to be silent. One evening, after speaking at a youth center, a young black woman, no older than 16, approached Simone, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and recognition. "Miss Dubois," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I've faced things like that too. Smaller things, but the way you stood up, it helped me realize I'm not alone. It showed me that I can be strong too." In that young woman's eyes, Simone saw a reflection of her past self, and a profound sense of empowerment washed over her. This wasn't just her story anymore, it was their story. It was a shared narrative of endurance and defiance. She saw it in the nods of agreement from older generations who had fought similar battles for decades. She saw it in the tearful embraces from parents who feared for their children. She saw it in the determined expressions of young people who were just beginning to understand the world's complexities. Simone was no longer just the graphic designer who had been attacked. She was a voice, a testament, a symbol of hope. Every shared word, every connection forged, was a step towards building a more empathetic, understanding world. She was transforming her trauma into tangible change. One conversation, one connection, one story at a time, driving away from those community gatherings, the city lights twinkling like distant promises. Simone felt a different kind of exhaustion, a purposeful, satisfying weariness. Her car, the very one that had been defaced, now felt like a chariot of change. The scars remained, of course, a constant reminder of the day she had faced hate head-on, but now they were no longer symbols of victimhood. They were etched onto her spirit, hardening her resolve, becoming the fuel for her continued fight to build a fairer world. She knew the fight for racial equality, for true dignity for all, was an ongoing marathon, not a sprint. There would be more battles, more moments of frustration, more subtle forms of prejudice. But she was ready. She was no longer just a woman who had fought to regain her dignity. She was someone who had discovered her profound power to inspire others. She had transformed the most painful experience of her life into a profound source of strength, not just for herself, but for her community. By Hock Rutra, from trauma, a powerful purpose can emerge. Simone's journey from victim to advocate is a testament to post-traumatic growth. The idea that profound adversity can lead to deeper understanding, greater resilience, and a clearer sense of purpose. Her choice to share her personal narrative underscores the immense power of storytelling itself. By speaking her truth, she not only healed herself, but also educated, connected with, and empowered countless others. This isn't about overcoming a single incident. It's about the long game of systemic change, recognizing that every individual act of courage contributes to a larger, collective movement. Simone's story, therefore, isn't just a tale of justice. It's a profound invitation to all of us. Her voice, once confined to a court transcript, now resonated in the hearts of those who listened, a testament to the unyielding spirit of resilience. And as she drove into the night, Simone Dubois knew that her journey, truly, had just begun, driven by the enduring power of her truth and the quiet strength of her purpose. If Simone's journey resonated with you, if you found power in her resilience, or if her story inspired you to stand taller, please let us know. Hit that like button to show your support for stories that champion justice and human dignity. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message of strength and perseverance. And if you believe, like us, that every voice deserves to be heard and every story of overcoming injustice needs to be told, then subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to ring that notification bell so you never miss another powerful narrative. Thank you for watching, for listening, and for being a part of this community that believes in a world where courage prevails and justice, though it may be delayed, will always find its way. Together, we can amplify these voices and build a stronger, more equitable future.